The clock read 5:15 a.m. on the 23rd of September 2009. Stockholm was still caught in the deep, heavy sleep of early morning. In the Västberga district, the air over the G4S cash depot was empty, save for the biting chill of autumn. Then, a shadow detached itself from the low-hanging clouds. A Bell 206 Jet Ranger moved through the dark, its engine muffled, gliding toward the rooftop with the precision of a predator. No sirens alerted the city. No lights flickered to warn the guards inside. The aircraft descended, a dark shape against the gray skyline, closing the distance to the concrete roof with deliberate, calculated speed. The pilot held the craft steady, hovering just inches above the structure. Then, the rhythmic thrum of the rotors suddenly accelerated, tearing through the quiet. The sound was no longer a hum. It was a deafening, mechanical roar that hammered against the building. The air pressure shifted violently, vibrating the reinforced concrete. The descent was finished. The arrival was absolute. The morning calm was gone, replaced by the crushing weight of an impending strike. The rotors kept spinning, a constant, punishing vibration against the roof. Before the dust from the landing could settle, 3 figures moved. They exited the craft with rapid, rehearsed movements, their focus fixed entirely on the center of the rooftop. They ignored the surrounding perimeter, heading directly for the massive skylight. One of them knelt, pressing a specialized device against the glass surface. He signaled to the others, and they stepped back, shielding their faces. The air grew still for a fraction of a second, a vacuum of sound before the trigger was pulled. The shaped charge detonated with a sharp, blinding crack. It did not just break the glass, it pulverized the frame, sending a storm of jagged shards and reinforced debris raining into the counting room far below. The sound echoed through the depot like a structural failure. Inside, the ceiling disintegrated, turning the workspace into a crater of dust and falling glass. The breach was clean, surgical, and violent. The path to the vault was now open, and the men on the roof did not hesitate. They moved to the edge of the shattered aperture, peering down into the cloud of debris that now filled the room. Below the shattered skylight, the counting room was a haze of pulverized concrete and stinging dust. The guards stumbled backward, coughing, their eyes straining to pierce the gray fog. One guard lunged toward the wall-mounted alarm, his fingers inches from the button, but the sudden sharp whistle of nylon rope slicing through the air stopped him cold. 2 thick lines dropped from the hole above, coiling onto the floor with a heavy thud. The guards froze. They were trained for standard intrusions, for locked doors and broken windows, but this was a descent from the sky. Every instinct to fight died in their throats as they looked up at the dark shapes emerging from the smoke. They retreated toward the far corner, their backs slamming against the cold steel of the storage lockers. Their sidearms remained locked in the secure cabinet across the room, now inaccessible behind the point of entry. They were isolated, trapped, and completely stripped of their defensive capability. The facility, once a fortress of steel and reinforced concrete, had become a cage. They stood huddled together, hands raised, watching as the intruders descended with methodical, terrifying calm. The silence in the room was heavier than the explosion, broken only by the steady, rhythmic clicking of ropes against the floor. Every movement from above was a clock tick, counting down the seconds until the robbers touched the ground. The guards did not move. They could not move. The heavy thud of boots hitting the concrete signaled the start. No words were exchanged. The intruders moved with the sharp, jerky precision of machines. One figure crossed the floor in 3 long strides, a sledgehammer swinging in a wide, punishing arc. He slammed it against the cage door. The steel groaned, dented, and held. He swung again, harder, the metal shrieking as the hinges buckled inward. With a final, violent kick, the door swung open, exposing the stacks of cash within. The others moved instantly, grabbing heavy, reinforced bags from the shelves. They worked with frantic, practiced efficiency, checking the weight of each sack before tossing it toward the center of the room. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and dust, but they ignored the environment. Their focus narrowed to the currency. Every second counted. They snatched the bags, heaving them onto their shoulders as if they weighed nothing at all. The guards remained fixed in the corner, watching the blur of motion as the robbers systematically stripped the cage. There was no hesitation, no wasted movement, only the rhythmic thumping of bags and the sharp metallic clatter of the cage door swinging on broken hinges. The clock was running, and they were racing to finish before the perimeter alarms finally registered the intrusion. The final bag hit the floor, and the lead intruder signaled upward. Without a glance at the stunned guards, they hooked their harnesses to the ropes, the winches engaged. They rose from the counting room, spinning slowly as they were pulled back toward the skylight. Below, the floor was empty, stripped of its contents. Above, the sky was bright, and the helicopter waited. As they vanished through the roof, the aircraft rotors surged, the pitch rising to a deafening metallic scream. The machine pulled away from the concrete, tilting its nose toward the horizon. At that exact second, the first police cruisers skidded to a halt outside the depot. Blue light strobed against the brick walls, casting long, frantic shadows. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, sprinting toward the building entrance. They scrambled up the stairs, their boots hammering against the steel steps, reaching the roof in a desperate rush. They burst through the door, expecting to find the team, but the air was already still. Only the lingering scent of exhaust remained. They ran to the edge of the roof, peering into the vast morning sky. There was nothing. The horizon was empty. The helicopter had dissolved into the distance, leaving the ground team staring at the clouds in total, hollow disbelief. The lead officer moved across the concrete, his hand steadying his weapon. He scanned the roof for any sign of movement, but the surface was abandoned. A cluster of objects near the skylight caught his attention. He signaled for his team to hold position. He stepped closer, boot crunching on broken glass, and looked down. 3 grenades lay in a neat row. He knelt, checking the pins, and realized they were inert replicas. His heart rate slowed, but his confusion deepened. He stood and swept his flashlight across the immediate area. A white piece of paper fluttered near the edge of the roof, held down by a discarded bolt. He picked it up with the tip of his glove. The ink was bold, deliberate, and mocking. "You will never catch us." The silence on the roof shifted. The frantic energy of the initial pursuit evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp realization. They had not just been robbed, they had been managed. The officers stared at the note, then at the empty expanse of the sky. Every security protocol, every alarm, every response time had been anticipated and accounted for. The reality of the heist settled over them like a physical weight. They were not chasing a fleeing suspect. They were standing in the middle of a perfectly executed, calculated performance. 2 hours after the robbery, a police spotter plane circled a dense patch of forest 10 miles north. The pilot banked the aircraft, pointing toward a clearing hidden by thick pine needles. There it was. The helicopter sat in a small, grassy hollow, rotors motionless, blades drooping. Ground units converged on the site within minutes, weapons drawn, anticipating a final standoff. They approached the landing zone with extreme caution, moving through the underbrush. The cabin was empty. The door stood slightly ajar, swaying in the light breeze. Forensics teams moved in, laying out their kits on the damp earth. They brushed the control surfaces for prints and swabbed the interior for biological traces. The lead investigator watched from the perimeter, his fingers tapping against his belt. Every surface was pristine. The robbers had not left a single hair, a stray fiber, or a smudge on the glass. The cockpit was stripped of anything that could provide a lead. The investigation team stood in the silent forest, the weight of their own inadequacy pressing down on them. The trail had vanished. The aircraft was a hollow shell, serving as a reminder that every step taken by the police had been anticipated by the crew. They had not just escaped, they had erased themselves. The investigation shifted from the forest floor to the digital trail left in the wake of the heist. Investigators searched remote regional hangars, looking for any facility that matched the flight patterns identified that morning. In a quiet, rural hangar miles from the city, they found it. The concrete floor was marked with precise tape lines, simulating the dimensions of the cash depot roof. The team had practiced their descent hundreds of times. Every maneuver was timed to the second. Documents recovered from the site detailed a rigorous, industrial approach to the theft. They had weighed every bag of cash with clinical accuracy, calculating the exact lift capacity of the helicopter to ensure a swift, heavy-laden takeoff. There was no room for error in their math. Every variable, from the rotor thrust to the weight of the gear, had been accounted for in these rehearsals. The investigators studied the logs, their frustration slowly giving way to a grim, begrudging acknowledgement. They were not looking for common criminals. They were tracking a professional unit that treated robbery as an engineering problem. The evidence laid out in the hangar spoke of months of dedication, turning a chaotic morning into a scripted surgical strike that had effectively bypassed every security barrier in the country. While investigators combed the empty forest, the robbers were already miles away. They had moved with the fluidity of water, abandoning the aircraft to slip into the waiting speedboats hidden along the shoreline. The lake was a vast, sprawling labyrinth of narrow channels and hidden inlets, a geographic trap for anyone who did not know the way. At the regional police headquarters, the air was thick with shouting. The order to launch tactical helicopters sat on a desk, stalled by layers of protocol and authorization delays. By the time the rotors finally spun to life, the sky over the lake was empty. The robbers pushed their boats into the narrowest branches of the waterway, where the dense overhanging branches provided a natural canopy against aerial surveillance. They moved in silence, throttles kept low, weaving through the channels with a map of the region that had been studied for months. Every second lost in the command center was a mile of distance gained by the crew. The police pilots flew over the main lake, circling in wide, futile patterns, while the robbers navigated the back passages toward the open sea. The escape was not just a successful flight, it was a total disappearance, leaving the authorities to search empty water while the team vanished into the horizon. The manhunt spanned months, turning into a nationwide obsession. Police eventually cracked the case, not through physical evidence, but by intercepting a series of encrypted communications that linked the crew to the depot strike. Arrests were made, and the perpetrators were brought before the courts. Yet the verdict did little to settle the public imagination. The sheer scale of the operation left a permanent mark on the country. Security protocols were rewritten from the ground up, but the question remained, how did they do it? The heist had been executed with such surgical precision that it defied standard criminal logic. It was not merely a theft, but a masterclass in logistics and timing that exploited the smallest gaps in a modern state. Even with the culprits behind bars, the story transitioned into urban legend. The memory of the silent helicopter, the shattering glass, and the vanishing act on the water became a benchmark for audacity. The nation looked back at the morning of September 23rd as the day the impossible became reality. It was a cold, calculated strike that exposed vulnerabilities no one knew existed, leaving behind a legacy of shock that outlived the trial, the prison sentences, and the very memory of the men who pulled the levers.